Welcome to this course, Introduction to Cybersecurity Literacy. This is Lesson 10, Common Password Threats. In the last lesson, I introduced passwords, and I explained how businesses use encryption formulas called hash functions to help keep your passwords a secret. It would be nice if that were the final word on the matter. That is, if hash functions would ensure that passwords would remain secure always and forever. But of course, that's not the world we live in. In the real world, our passwords remain vulnerable. In this lecture, I'll introduce you to 10 common threats to your passwords: user disclosure, social engineering, phishing, keylogging, wireless sniffing, brute force guessing, dictionary attacks, unencrypted password files, exposed passwords with known hash values, and security questions. Throughout this video, I'll suggest ways in which you can minimize these threats. As you will see, it's important to have a strong password, but it's even more important to handle your password wisely. Password threat 1 is user disclosure. Now, this might seem obvious, but you shouldn't tell other people your passwords. You can never tell for certain who is and who is not trustworthy. You might respond, "Oh, I trust this person. I know that she's not a cyber criminal." And there's a good chance that you're right. However, are you sure that you trust all of the people that this other person trusts? What if she discloses your password to a criminal somehow? And even if you don't believe that this trusted person would intentionally disclose your password, are you really sure that she wouldn't do so accidentally? If you let your mind wander for a moment, it's easy to think of dozens of scenarios in which a trusted person could accidentally lose or disclose your private password. The bottom line is that as soon as you share your password, you lose control over how that password is shared by others. Why take such an unnecessary risk? Just keep them to yourself. You should especially avoid emailing or messaging your password to other people. Even if you trust the recipient with your life, you can't guarantee that somebody else isn't reading their emails or won't read them sometime in the future. You should also avoid writing your password down in obvious places. If you do have to write a password down, don't keep it near your computer. And for goodness sake, don't keep a list of passwords on your computer under the file name passwords. Avoid keeping your passwords on a computer file altogether unless you're using a trusted password management software. If you keep a handwritten list of passwords, keep that list somewhere secret and safe. Remember, no matter how strong your password is, its strength does you no good if you simply disclose it to the bad guys. Password threat number 2 is social engineering. Sometimes, as we've just seen, users might disclose their passwords simply by being careless. Other times, however, cybercriminals work behind the scenes to create social situations that encourage users to disclose their passwords. This is called social engineering. A cybercriminal is unlikely to simply call you up on the phone and shout, "Hey, you, give me your passwords." They will be more sneaky than that. They might call you on the phone and say that they're an IT professional from your school or your work, and under this disguise, they might ask you for your password. Don't fall for such schemes. And this telephone trick is only one example of social engineering. There are many, many kinds of social engineering out there, and we'll discuss social engineering a little more in later videos in this course. Password threat number 3 is phishing. Phishing is one kind of social engineering. It might be the most common kind. In phishing scams, a cybercriminal sends out bait, often in the form of an email. And that bait encourages unwitting users to voluntarily disclose their passwords. Here's an example of a real phishing email that I received in my university email inbox. "Dear Chase customer," it says, "your online account will expire today on Thursday, February 13th, 2014. To keep your account updated, please click Log On to Chase Online and proceed with the verification process. Copyright 2014, J.P. Morgan Chase & Company." There are a lot of red flags in this email, but the most significant one is that I do not bank at Chase, so this is clearly a fraud. What do you think would happen if I clicked on that link? Now, I didn't click on it because it's not safe to click on fraudulent links like this, but if I had clicked on it, I'm sure I would have been confronted with some fake so-called verification forms, and I'm sure those forms would have asked me to enter my login information for Chase. If I did have a Chase account, and if I had entered my login information into those fraudulent forms, I'm sure that I would have been giving my banking information over to a cybercriminal. No bank or other legitimate institution will send you an urgent email insisting that you log into their website. In fact, you should avoid entering login information into any website that you have arrived at by clicking on a link in an email. If you receive suspicious or apparently urgent emails or even text messages from your bank or from any other institution that you do business with, you can always look up their phone number and call them on the phone and then ask them about it. In all likelihood, they'll inform you that the message you received was a scam, and they'll recommend that you delete it. They may even ask you to provide more information about the scam so that they can prepare to defend their other customers against it. It's worth pointing out that strong passwords won't protect you from social engineering scams such as phishing scams. Only your wits and your wisdom will protect you from such scams. Password threat number 4 is keylogging. Another way that cybercriminals discover passwords is through the use of keylogging hardware or keylogging software. Let's look at keylogging hardware first. A keylogger keeps track of every keystroke made on a particular keyboard or on a particular computer. Keylogging hardware consists of small, discrete devices that plug into a computer's USB drive. These devices themselves contain a USB port which the keyboard cable plugs into. Keylogging devices blend in well with the cables and plugs and ports on the back of a computer, and they're difficult to spot if you aren't looking for them. Although keyloggers are small, they can store months' worth of keystroke records, so a cybercriminal could quickly install a keylogger into a public computer, say at a library, and then they could return for the keystroke records weeks or months later. But not all keyloggers require extra hardware devices. There is such a thing as keylogging software as well, and it's completely invisible from the outside of the computer. Keylogging software is a computer application that keeps track of your keystrokes. The keylogger might save those keystroke records on the computer to be extracted later, or it could even message the data to a third party somewhere else in the world through the internet. Because keylogging hardware is easy to install on public computers, it's good practice to avoid logging into private accounts on public computers. But for your own private devices, keylogging software is probably the greater threat. You can avoid keylogging software by only visiting websites that you trust so as to avoid unintentionally downloading the keylogging software. Of course, you should also only install software on your computer if you know and trust the source of that software. And remember, even if you're careful with your computer, your friends may not be careful with theirs. It's very difficult for a user to know whether their friends' computers have keylogging software on them. So it's a good idea to avoid logging into private accounts on a friend's computer. As a rule of thumb, security risks are usually greater on computers that you don't control. So, can a strong password protect you from keylogging devices and keylogging software? Unfortunately, no. The best protections from keyloggers are informed use of your own computer and caution when using computers that are controlled by other people. Password threat number 5 is wireless sniffing. Have you ever seen a movie where somebody's having a private telephone conversation on a landline telephone, and then somebody else picks up a different phone somewhere else in the house and eavesdrops on that conversation? Well, wireless sniffing is a similar kind of eavesdropping that can happen on public wireless internet connections. Say you're in a coffee shop surfing the web. A cybercriminal within range of that wireless network can use a variety of methods to intercept the signals sent back and forth between your computer and the wireless router. So they can intercept the information that's sent from the wireless router to your computer, and they can also intercept the information that your computer sends to a wireless router. Can a strong password protect you from wireless sniffing? Again, no, it can't. The way to protect yourself from wireless sniffing will be to understand how wireless networks work, to understand the weaknesses that cybercriminals attack, and to understand how you can avoid those weaknesses. And we're going to discuss those things in more detail in other lessons. Password threat number 6 is brute force guessing. One way that cybercriminals discover passwords is by just guessing them. In a brute force attack, a cybercriminal uses a computer to try to guess every possible password for your account until she just happens to guess the right one. Can a strong password protect you from brute force guessing? Yes, it can. Short passwords take much less time to crack by these methods than long, strong passwords do. Every character that you add to your password makes your password exponentially more difficult to randomly guess. Furthermore, adding more kinds of characters will also make your password more difficult to guess. A long password consisting of lowercase letters is difficult to randomly guess, but a long password consisting of both lowercase and capital letters is much, much more difficult to randomly guess. Adding more keyboard symbols like numbers and punctuation marks adds even more possibilities for the brute force attacker to deal with. Websites will also help to protect you from brute force attackers by requiring users to complete a completely automated public Turing test to tell computers and humans apart, or a CAPTCHA as it's commonly abbreviated. A CAPTCHA presents symbols on the screen that are difficult for computers to interpret, but easy for humans. If the user can't interpret the CAPTCHA, then the website denies their login request. This way, even if a computerized attack does guess your password, the CAPTCHA helps to prevent the computer from automatically logging into your account. Password threat number 7 is dictionary attacks. Because there are practically innumerable possible passwords and cybercriminals don't have infinite time to spend trying to crack them, brute force guessing is often pretty impractical. However, in reality, users don't usually choose literally random strings of characters as their passwords, because literally random strings of characters are difficult to remember. Users follow patterns when they create passwords, and many of them tend to follow the same patterns. Cybercriminals keep lists of popular passwords and popular password patterns, and they'll limit their password guessing to these lists. Such focused attacks are called dictionary attacks. Some dictionary attack lists will contain millions of potential passwords. That's a lot of passwords, and it's more than a person could work through on their own. But with the help of a computer, a cybercriminal can potentially work through such a list relatively quickly. Therefore, dictionary attacks are much more practical than brute force guessing attacks. Dictionary attacks usually target common passwords like the word password, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the home row keys A, S, D, F, J, K, L, semicolon, or the phrase, let me in. They might also target public information about a user. For example, sometimes people will incorporate their own name, address, or phone number into their password. Cybercriminals know this, and so they'll sometimes add publicly available knowledge about a user into their dictionary attacks. Publicly available knowledge includes things like your name and telephone number, which might be available in a telephone directory. It also includes whatever information the public can see about you on your social networking sites like Facebook or Twitter. If you tweet about your cat, then a cybercriminal might decide to incorporate your cat's name into a dictionary attack. Can a strong password protect you from dictionary attacks? Yes, it can. A strong password avoids common keywords and patterns that cybercriminals exploit in dictionary attacks. Password threat number 8 is password files that aren't encrypted. In a previous lesson, I discussed the encryption of password files. In order to keep lists of user passwords safe, companies will normally encrypt them using an irreversible algorithm called a hash function. However, it turns out that not all companies hashed their passwords. In 2009, hackers broke into a social media service called RockYou and stole their password files. The passwords had not been encrypted, so the hackers obtained a list that displayed 32 million usernames and passwords in just plain old, ordinary, unencrypted text. Now, there isn't much that you can do to protect yourself from such an attack. You just don't have very much control over whether or not a company encrypts your passwords. But the RockU attack has some instructive potential for us. The password list at RockU went public, and so we can use that list to determine some common user-chosen passwords. Since the bad guys have this list too, we know to avoid common passwords such as those at the very top of the RockU list. It's worth noticing that the top 3 passwords at RockU were 123456, 12345, and 123456789. A strong password won't protect your password from being stolen off of a company server. However, these attacks at least help us to understand which passwords we should avoid in the first place. Password security threat number 9 is exposed passwords with known hash values. Sometimes, cybercriminals will steal a list of encrypted password files even though they don't have the means to break the encryption. So how is this useful to them? Well, it turns out that cybercriminals can often get access to the same algorithms that the good guys use to encrypt passwords. So there really isn't anything to stop a cybercriminal from taking a known password, running it through the algorithm, and seeing what value it spits out. Here, we can see that the word password gets converted into a long string of numbers and letters starting with 5F4. It's possible, and relatively easy, for cybercriminals to obtain long lists of common passwords and then to determine the hash values for all of them. Now, if a cybercriminal steals a company's list of encrypted passwords, they can search the encrypted passwords for hash values that match the list that they've made themselves. In this example, the username Gadget has an encrypted password that matches the encrypted value that was obtained by encrypting the word password. So that means that Gadget's password must also be the word password. So if hackers steal a list of encrypted passwords from a company that you do business with, they can sometimes figure out your password. They'll compare the stolen encrypted passwords to passwords that they have encrypted for themselves. However, a strong password will help to protect you from this kind of attack. The stronger your password is, the less likely it is to appear on a list of passwords that cybercriminals have encrypted for themselves. Password threat number 10 is security questions. What happens if you forget your own password? Many online businesses offer a password retrieval service so that losing your password doesn't necessarily mean that you'll lose your account altogether. Many password retrieval systems rely on security questions. To retrieve your password, you must answer a supposedly secret question correctly. If you get the question right, the service will email you your password or perhaps email you a link to a password reset service. The problem with this system is that security questions are often much easier to guess than the passwords themselves. Common security questions are, what is your mother's maiden name? Who was your childhood best friend? And what is your favorite pet's name? Sometimes it's really easy to obtain the answers to those questions. The answers might be posted on somebody's Facebook page, or maybe they'll be revealed in a tweet or an Instagram photo. So, how should you deal with security questions? One good practice is to simply lie. Another method is to tell the truth, but to add a random string of characters at the end of your true response. This random string amounts to a secondary password. Even if a hacker knows the answer to your security question, she'll have a hard time guessing this secondary password. Most companies' password retrieval systems will lock out the user after a few failed attempts to answer the security question. Whether you choose to lie or to use the truth plus a secondary password, the hacker is unlikely to guess your security response in just a few guesses. They'll probably get locked out. Whichever solution you choose, one difficulty will remain. How should you go about remembering your response to the security question? If you can forget your password, then surely you can forget your response to the security question too, especially if it's a lie or involves a second password. In a future lecture, I'll share some recommendations for password management. Many of these recommendations will apply equally well to security questions as they do to passwords. Okay, so let's review. In this lesson, we touched on 10 common password threats: user disclosure, social engineering, phishing, keylogging, wireless sniffing, brute force guessing, dictionary attacks, password files that are not encrypted, exposed passwords with known hash values, and finally, security questions. In the next video, we're going to talk about how to create a strong password.